Hey everyone, figured I'd make a quick intro for today's video that you're about to watch. It's a simple mix process of how I go about mixing a song, getting all processed and set up for mixing in a session. I did this as a live stream around New Year's Day. I hope you guys enjoy it. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the half-hour video. All right, see you guys. My head, I'm just gonna review what I did in stream and what I did to mix a song. I'm just gonna break down what I started on, show my plugins, my settings, and how I came up to my final results. Here's what it sounds like with no effects on the tracks whatsoever. Now, within my head, I originally released an electric version January of 2021 on my debut EP, JoJo's Horror Show. This is all the raw tracks, like I said, and I turned it into an acoustic version. I took the original vocals. This is the alternate take from that version that I use as the basis for the lead vocals. And I have backing vocals. The singer, her name is Katie. She has a solo career under her name Katie, a duo called Artax from Scotland. And I have some harmony vocals from me. Let's see, we have our instruments. All the instruments were recorded by me for this acoustic version. I have 2 acoustic guitar tracks, 1 pan left, 1 pan right. And then I have a 12-string that's pan standard that I had in the intro. And the choruses to fill out some space and harmonic color, and I have a mandolin. And the percussion, I have a cajon, I have a microphone on the front faceplate of it, and a microphone on the back end of it to get some of the snappiness and the low end mixed together. I have shakers and tambourines. I also had a room mic about 3 to 4 feet away from the instrument sources as I was recording them. I panned each of the instruments accordingly of how I wanted them in the mix. I summed everything to 1 solo track. Beginning in the stream of mixing, I started with the cajon here. On the front, I ran through an EQ. I can now set up. Alright, so I ran the EQ through with some low end. I added a little bit of mid-range on the snappiness. And on the back, excuse me as I get into the other monitor. On the back, I boosted the low end to get some more oomph. I cut some of the high end and I cut some of the low mids out. Then I have both the front and back microphones going into a bus for the cajon bus. I am running into EQ just to help clean up a little bit in the mids and the low end, just so it'll sit along the guitars nice and well. I just add a little bit of grit onto the mix. I added a compressor onto the entire cajon bus. The compressor is just to help glue both the front end mics together, just to make it sound like one audio source. Well, to make it sound like one mic as opposed to having be 2 separate mics on 1 instrument. Make it a lot more coherent, so it's pretty much like a glue to bind the cajon together. And I figure I'll start with the shakers as we're coming in, and tambourine. The shakers and tambourine. I pretty much did very similar things on both the shakers and tambourine. I cut off a lot of the low end on both. The tambourine, I cut a little bit of the high end out. And then I boosted a little bit of the upper mids in the shakers. Just from the set. Here they are again. Percussion. I just ran through EQ on the percussion and get that over on the correct screen. percussion bus. Here's how everything sounds. Just percussion on its own. I cleaned up the low end a little bit, some of the lower mids, so it wasn't conflicting with the guitars. This is just to glue all the percussion together, just to have a really nice balance and foundation for my instruments. Now, I apologize if any questions you guys have. Don't be afraid to leave any questions in the comment section below. I'll gladly answer any questions about mixing and go a bit further in detail with it. Now let's mute the vocals and work on the guitars. On the mandolin and acoustic guitars, I'm running them all through this SSL G channel plugin I got from Waves Audio. It's modeling after an SSL soundboard. I really enjoy it. It has low cut, a few different frequency ranges from the high end to an upper mid, lower mid, and here is the mandolin. See, I cut out a lot of the low end, right around 200 hertz. I boosted the high end. I'll start again. The upper mids I cut out about a decibel and a half. Around the upper mids about 1.3 kilohertz. And then I boosted the lower mids around 500-ish, 600-ish hertz. And I have a light compressor on it. So I wanted to really blend nice with the acoustic guitars. Let's see. Next thing I worked on was the acoustic guitar. I did a very similar thing on this acoustic guitar. This is the 12th thing in the center. I wanted it to really sit back in the mix and not really be the main focus. I have it direct in the center, and this 12-string acoustic track is just more of a ambient filler track just to really fill up space. Let's see, I cut out the high end right around what I did for the mandolin, around 200 hertz. In this case, I took out some of the high end just because my 12-string tends to have a lot of high end frequency shimmer. I want to really pull that back just so I could make room for the tambourine and shakers, and then have the mandolin kind of cut through a bit more for the high end. And then I just added a little bit of upper mids just to have it cut through. Now, this one here is A1, the guitar on the left. This one here is A2, the acoustic is in the right. Now, with guitars, I usually like to cut out a bit of the low end to clean it up. Now, I would usually cut out a little bit more low end on acoustic guitars when it's in a full mix with drum kits, bass guitars, synthesizers, electric guitars going. But since this is an acoustic track with just the cajon occupying the low end, I wanted to have a little bit more low end for the guitars just to fill out that bottom end a bit better. Now, I did add high end, about 5 decibels, 6 decibels, around 8 kilohertz range. Adjusted both the upper and lower mids by about 3 decibels on either side. And this is something I learned from Warren Hewart, where when you have two guitar tracks that are doing very similar things, and in stereo, one left, one right, you want to have it set up where the upper mids, you want to raise one side and lower one side by the same dB range. So in this case, I have the upper mids raised about 3 dBs, the lower end, the upper mids on the left end lowered a bit, and then vice versa for the upper mids. For the left side, I'll have boosted lower mids and cut higher mids. And on the right side, I'll have boosted upper mids and cut lower mids. I'll gladly explain it in the comments if anyone has any questions, or I'll probably link the video or videos that produce like a pro channel mentioned this concept in. But I really enjoyed how that worked out over the years. In stream, I was going between mono mix here, stereo mix. This is here to balance to make sure it was all good. You want to mix in mono to get the balance of everything really solid and squared away. So that way, when it's in stereo, you could really know, okay, stereo is going to sound really good if your mono mix sounds amazing. Theory behind this is, with mono mixing, nowadays a lot of people are listening to music either through their cell phones or tablets, both of which are mono mixes, or they'll be sending through a Bluetooth speaker where the majority are mono mixes. So if you're referencing back to the mono mix, you'll have a really good idea of what it'll most likely sound like through the most common playback situations. I had both the guitar mandolin folder and the percussion folder going into instrument folder. Now on this instrument folder, I am running a software plugin from Softube called Tape. It emulates a tape machine to give it a slight little compression and a bit more of a saturated feel, a light saturation to give it a bit more of analog warmth. Then I put on a limiter. I used a Loudmax 64-bit. I really enjoy this limiter. I have it set just to make it a bit more even. Now this acoustic room, like I mentioned, it's all the instrumental tracks recorded from a room mic that I have set up in my room, right by where my Jaguar behind me is. You taking off some of the low end, I took out some of the lower mids just to help clean up the room a bit, and I added just a hair of high end. And then just to help with the reverb, I went into the R-verb from Waves with a room sample. Here's with the stereo reverb on. Here's with it off. Now you can hear with it off, I got a pretty decent room reflection in the room. I figured with this reverb, it'll help add it a little bit more and exemplify it. See here on the wet dry knob, I have a balance of about 60% of the wet signal from the plugin and about 40% of the dry audio tracks. And I just added a saturation knob just to add in a little bit of color. So that'll be the instruments, how they all sound together. Let's see, I end up going into the vocals. And I'll loop the chorus and I'll start with the backing vocals. Now, backing vocals, I had a lot of fun doing these. I'll solo them. I have 2 backing vocals from the lead singer Katie. I have a higher one panned hard left, a lower one from her panned hard right. I have a bass range voice from me, bringing the center. And then I have a higher harmony from me that's matching, and I have another harmony from me. Now this harmony here, I have called octave. It's an octave down from the lead vocal, so it's the exact melody idea. Harmonizing an octave. We'll give you an insight on how I approach different vocals and ideas. Now, this one, high one, this one will be on the left, and this one will be on the right. Now, my voice, I'm a naturally high baritone, well, high bass, low baritone vocal range. So I keep a bit more of the low end. Cutting out around 100 to 120 hertz, depending on exactly the frequency range I'm using. I have a compressor on all the backing vocals that are hitting about a 3-to-1 ratio. Just keep everything a bit more dynamically even and uniform throughout the backing vocals. Then I'm setting a bit of high-end shimmer, a little bit of the upper mids, just to make sure everything's all nice and coherent and working together. I adjusted the volume automation on both of these, and then I'll pull over. this EQ track from High Harmony from Katie. Now, with Katie's vocals, I took out about 200 hertz on the low end, just because he's more of a alto soprano voice. Just cleaned up the audio on that a little bit, just make it all uniform with my backing vocals. I like to put all the backing vocals to one bus and EQ that bus to make it like one track, like it was a group of us singing in a choir, even though it was just me and one other person doing 5 harmony tracks. I started with this EQ, cut out some of the low end, I cut out some of the mids around 1 kilohertz, and I just boosted some of the high ends. A little bit of a sparkle, saturation knob, just to give it a little bit of color and push. The mix, and here's it in mono, so you can hear the back-end vocals are balanced with the instruments in mono, so they're not overpowering the instruments, and they're also not being swallowed out by the instruments. And finally, I ran the backing vocal through a compressor, a pretty light compressor at about 2.6 dB to 1. Every time it goes above the threshold I set, it cuts every decibel above that down 2.6 dB to raise the attack a little bit. Usually, with a lower attack, you're going to get a bit more darker warmth. You raise the attack speed, it'll allow for a little bit of a brighter sound coming through the compressor. I got the backing vocals to sound very concise and straight to the point. They're sitting very nice with the vocals while in the instruments. I'm going to set room for the lead vocals. The lead vocal, I got it pretty simple as far as mixing. It started with the G channel. Here's with it on. Here's with it off. Now I had to take out some of the volume to have it sit back a little bit better. Here's the mono, where the lead vocal is right on top. There we go. Now, lead vocals, it really depends on the singer. Is it a male voice in the baritone range? Is it someone in the tenor alto range? Is it a soprano singer? You know, are they really close to the microphone like this? Are they a bit farther away from the microphone like this? That's really going to dictate how you're going to EQ, compress, and really get the vocal set up. So what I'm showing is not really one shoe fits all. It's more based on working with the singer in the past and knowing her voice, her singing technique, and her microphone, which the microphone also plays a big play on what you're getting. So I'm going to cut out a little bit of the low end. I'm going to boost a little bit of the high end, around the 9 to 10K range, about decibel or 2, without boosting the high mids around 2.5K. It sits, it sounds good. And here's it in the mix. You can hear, sounds good. It's missing something. So if I boost the upper mids around 2.5 kilohertz, you can hear right here, they pop out quite a bit more without really raising a lot in volume. They're a bit more coherent, and this is definitely something you learn more you do mixing and get into the habit of mixing, and it's something that you build up over time, and it takes a while to practice. Let's get back into this lead vocal. The lower mids around 600-700 hertz, boost it up, and then I grabbed a separate graphic EQ, the stock one from Reaper, and then this I just helped cut out some more of the low ends so I could really get some of that separation, put the lead vocal more in its place. Then I put a saturation knob just to kind of give it a little bit more coloration on the mid-range. This track here that I have highlighted right now and soloed, this is a lead effects track. Right now it's raw, and I have it receiving the lead vocal before any of the effects applied to it, so this is running in parallel with the lead vocal. And here's what it sounds like with all the effects on. This is where things get pretty interesting. Now if you notice, they're running in parallel at the same time. Here's with the effects off. Here's with the effects on. Wet effects in parallel to the dry vocals, so I could control the volume a lot better, keep everything a lot more even. And this adds a lot more color in the mix. I'll get into the effects that I have on this in a second. Now let's get to the mix really quick. Here's the lead vocals without the wet effects on. As you can hear, turn the lead vocals into track. It fits. It works. Here's with the wet effects. You can hear the volume's a bit down, but it adds a little bit of something. It adds a little bit of character. Just make the lead vocal push through the mix a little bit better, a little bit more unique. Now here's without the effects. Here's with the effects. Then here's in mono with the effects on. Here's in mono without the effects. This effects track of the lead vocals so we could really hear what's going on with the effects that I have on here. Now I'll turn them all off and go through in order, since I have a lot of fun doing this. With this effects track that I run on lead vocals, I kind of have it set up like a PA system, like you're in a Walmart in the middle of the night. There's 5 employees and 5 customers in a big Walmart supercenter, and you hear someone pays over the intercom and you just hear it reverberate. That's the kind of effect style I go for this wet track. So I started with EQ that cuts out a lot of low end right around 300 hertz, 280, a very narrow band around 1 kilohertz, and I just ever so slightly tweaked up the highs. Next thing I went into was a doubler from Waves. Now this is a very interesting thing. And this doubler, it takes the signal, and you could add either 2 voices or 4 voices, and you could adjust the timing variance and the pitch variance of the tracks. So this is the direct signal, a bit quieter than the 4 pitched, and then here's just all 4 of those pitched. It just makes it sound a bit more warbled, makes it sound like you're singing through a chorus pedal on a guitar. Next thing I went into just to boost the volume a bit, to give this sound a bit more of a grittier color and tone. I went through this Softube saturation knob again. Absolutely love this for the color it adds. Next thing I went into was the Little Altar Boy from Sound Toys. This plugin, great. I could change the format. I have it set about here because I like the timbre, but you could do something like this, demonic. You could bring it up, have it a bit higher. As I adjust the formants very drastically, you can notice some digital artifacts just kind of appearing a little bit. So I keep the formant subtle. I have a drive knob, just add a bit of grit. I have it where it's sending through both the unaffected signal and then the wet signal from the Little Altar Boy, just so then you can get the best of both worlds coming out of this. And since this isn't the main lead vocals that you hear, and it's just more of a supplementary effects track, just to add a lot of grit and coloration, just to push the lead vocals through the mix a lot more. I just do the balance like this. I have it on a vocal plate setting. I have it back into the mix in a bit more ambient style, just so it could fill out. That's the lead vocals without the effects yet again, with the effects on one more time. And then I sent the vocals to a bus. I did the same thing on the vocal bus as I did with the instrument bus. I put the tape plug-in from Softube just to give it a little bit of color on the mix and have everything just be coherent, concise, and glued together for the vocals. This is tape saturation I have on the mix. This just glues everything together as everything just really emulsify and get together and really get to know each other. Yeah, I'll run into a few other things that I do. Now I'm going to solo this track down here called Parallel Mix. Now this is something I began to do over the past few years where I'm running the entire mix bus parallel folder. In this parallel folder, you'll narrow everything down. I'll really focus in more on the mids of the entire mix. I'll add a saturation knob, add a lot more color and mid-range fret through the saturation. And then I'll put on a very strong compressor. I use PDR Sultanvuk. I don't know if I pronounced that right. But I'll send it through a very strong compressor, a 7:1 ratio with a pretty moderately high threshold. I'll put the makeup gains in so I add a bit more grit. And then I'll turn the volume. Now I'll mute that. Now turn the volume down to the parallel mix, and I'll slowly bring it in. And notice as I turn it up, it just adds a bit more subtle color underneath the mix. Here's with it off. So here's the parallel mix. Well, here's the mix without the parallel mix engaged. Here's with it engaged. As you can hear, it just adds a lot more just color, saturation, and depth to the mix. Like I mentioned before, this parallel mix is something I began doing over the past 2.5 years. I have a plate reverb and a hall reverb. I have it set up the same exact way on both of them. The last thing they go into is a stereo Weiner ozone imager from Isotope reverb. I'm EQing the entire signal. For this particular song, I took out a little bit of the mids. And I'll show you without the low end and with the low cut on. Since that tends to be a lot more of the powerful frequencies, the low end from hitting on the cajon, or if you're playing a drum kit, the kick drum, bass, the low end of the guitar, that tends to really push the reverb a lot harder. So I put that on to clean up the reverbs a lot better, just so I don't get a lot of this low end rumble building up into reverb. This one is a simple plate reverb, and I'll show you the hall reverb in a second. This one in particular, you'll notice a lot more with the EQ. Now, here's with the low cut. This one I have it pretty severe, about 250 hertz. And if I take it out, you could hear, especially with the cajon, causes a lot of just like popping and snapping in the low end, and a lot of just build up that you don't really want. And here with it on, if you pay attention to the cajon, you could hear it's a lot more concise. So low cuts on reverbs help really clean everything up. And the last thing I really have to show is the entire mix. What my final mixes will sound like before I export this file out and then get them set up to be mastered. I could do a separate video showcasing my mastering setup and how I get that going. If you guys are interested, drop a comment below. Let me know. I would love to hear your feedback. But here's the song with everything on it. The parallel mix I have, all the reverbs. I figured I'll show my way out with it. All right.